Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and with me today is the DYU D3F. Now this is an electric mini bike. This is a type of e-bike that's become increasingly popular over It's surprisingly fun. The DYU D3F is powered by a 240 watt rear hub motor, and powering that hub motor is a 36 volt 10 amp hour or 360 watt hour battery that actually sits right here in the middle of the frame. The whole midsection of the frame is actually the battery. And that's a fairly large battery for such a small e-bike. 360 watt hours is a substantial amount of power for a 240 watt hour e-bike, and one that's as small as this one. And while we very often see the DYU D3F piloted by adults, one of the ways we most commonly see this e-bike in the wild is actually being ridden by kids. We all the time see kids riding these things to and from school, around the neighborhoods, and I think the reason why parents are buying these for children is fairly obvious. It's very small. The 14-inch wheels are going to be a little bit closer to what you'd expect for your average child's bike, and then at less than 38 pounds, it's pretty light and easy to handle. It also has a really kind of calm maximum speed of 15.5 miles an hour. So we broke the mold a little bit in our review, and instead of having this thing exclusively reviewed by adults, we actually loaned it out to one of the kids of an EBR colleague of mine. She's 10 years old, 5 foot 2 feet tall. She's got a little bit of experience riding electric vehicles. She rides an electric scooter to school every day, so she knows how the throttle and an electric motor will work. And she also is pretty confident on a bike. And she absolutely loved this thing. I believe her exact quote was something like, "This is the greatest day I've ever had," or something like that. She loved riding the DYU. Her mom and dad took her on about a 20-mile ride, which is really incredible for a 10-year-old. That's a lot of miles to tick off. It was a little bit small for her at 10 years old. She's about 5 foot 2 again, so it's not a perfect kid's bike, but if you have someone who's a little bit shorter than that, it would work very well. And her mom and dad were comfortable enough on it, with her riding it, that they're going to actually have her ride this thing to school instead of her electric scooter. She prefers it over her electric scooter. And to get an idea of how well these brakes work, we're going to put it through a stopping test. Normally how we conduct this test is we bring the bike up to its maximum throttle assisted speed of 20 miles an hour and slam on the brakes as hard as possible to get an average stopping distance. This thing tops out about 15.5 miles an hour, and with that relatively small gear ratio, I can't really pedal it any further than that. So we're going to bring it up to about as fast as it can go, slam on the brakes 5 times to get an average stopping distance that's just relative to the DYU specifically. It's still going to tell us some stuff about the bike, and more specifically how well it comes to a stop, but let's see how this little bike performs. Despite that idiosyncrasy, and despite the fact that we couldn't get this bike up to the normal testing speed of 20 miles an hour, it did seem to come to a stop really well on an average of 6 feet and 11 inches. That's really short. Keep in mind, we weren't going 20 miles an hour on this. We were going maybe 13 to 15 miles an hour on average every time I pulled the brake levers. One other thing that's important to keep in mind, and this might be attributable to the fact that the brake levers are reversed and I'm used to pulling that right-hand lever harder than the left because it would normally be operating the rear brake, is I found myself doing a nose wheelie on almost every hard braking test that I did. That was a little bit something that took me by surprise. It would probably be something that took the average rider by surprise, so keep that in mind, especially if you haven't taken the time to actually swap the brakes. But overall, a pretty good braking result. We can't compare it to anything else, but I feel like 6 feet 11 inches is pretty solid. Shockingly, for a peanut-sized e-bike that costs less than $500 MSRP, the DYU D3F's 360 watt-hour battery actually puts up a really solid range. Normally for our range testing, we do 2 separate tests, one in a high PAS setting and one in a low PAS setting. But because this bike only has one level of pedal assistance, we gave it to our test rider and told her to just ride it how she thinks a normal person would, mixing the throttle and the pedal assistance. And what she got was a range of 29.65 miles, which is actually really, really substantial. Is that if you're riding this bike for about as long as I would expect you to, which I comfortably found to be 5 to 8 miles maximum, you're just not going to have to charge the battery a ton. You're going to have to pay attention to it, but it's not going to be a bike that you have to charge the battery every single ride. Or if you're a kid and you're zipping around the neighborhood, clocking miles with your friends, going back and forth to school, you can actually go pretty far on this bike. Again, we mentioned that the child test rider that we put on this bike rode it for about 20 miles. They didn't have to charge it, they didn't have to worry about battery that whole time. What makes this miniature electric bike an electric bike is its 240 watt rear hub motor that's housed in the single piece wheel in the rear. Now, that is not exactly the fastest motor. It's capped at 15.5 miles an hour on both the throttle and its one level of pedal assist. But I can personally attest, by being someone who's put a good number of miles on this bike, that I don't really think it needs to go any faster than that. Especially being a full-size adult, there's some weird handling characteristics that happen, and 15 miles an hour is just plenty fast. So, overall, good performance from this motor. It's really about what we'd expect. We're definitely trying to review this bike, keeping it in mind that it's a mini bike that costs less than $500. And with those things in mind, I'd say it's pretty solid.